I wanted to continue on discussing a little bit more about what I was talking about in the last car video in regards to acting as if, um, which is something that, we often hear that phrase in the law of attraction community. And, specifically like law of assumption, Neville based stuff. A lot of it is, in my opinion, is it can be very theatrical and acting as if. And what I want to talk about today is that, and I touched upon it at the end of the last video, is this imaginative acting, this modeling, for instance, modeling someone you want to be, like imitating them, or picking up, like, for instance, seeing somebody in a movie, like a character in a movie who has a quality you like. I don't know for you, but for me, and like, granted, this might not be for everybody, but for me, always having been really into movies, resonating with movies a lot, I know when I see like a good movie or like a good character, it's almost like a lot, like I'm like feeling their energy or something. And like I feel that energy after I've seen the movie or the TV show. It's like I resonate with that energy. And like, in a way, I almost can like I'm on the same wavelength or frequency as them, right? If we're gonna use that language. Um, and it's like that state is in me now, right? It was a state I actually already had, but I'm able to access it by watching like a good film or a good character in a movie or something like that. Like, I resonate with it more. That kind of modeling a behavior is very easy to do. And this is something that I think is easier to understand if you're into ideas like law of assumption ideas, because you know the power of your imagination. As Coué says, your imagination is overwhelmingly powerful. And the thing is, and I discuss, if this seems vague, I discuss this much more in a more succinct, laid out way in The Law of Attraction Simplified. A lot of that book, The Law of Attraction Simplified, is talking about this concept. Um, but, in our everyday life, the things suggested to us culturally, so just going through our life, especially if we're not careful, if we're just listening to what people say, watching the news and not thinking about it that much, we're being suggested to a ton of negativity, a lot of negativity, right? I don't think anybody would really argue with that. The general outlook of our culture tends to be, one could say, pessimistic or negative, lackful. Um, and if you're not aware of that, chances are you're going to be taking in a lot of those suggestions, unthinkingly, and they're going to be affecting you. You might say, "Oh, I'm not affected by this negative news. I'm not affected by this comment that somebody makes to me, or a coworker makes to me, or what my partner says to me." But chances are, as the day goes along, or over the course of a day, with all of these somewhat negative suggestions that we are, being exposed to, unless we're, cognizant and aware of it, that stuff's going to affect us. And quite frankly, even if we are aware of it, that stuff is often going to affect us, at least most of the time, for most people. But we can limit the amount of suggestibility that we accept when it comes to this negativity. We can get better and better at doing that. And likewise, if there are like certain characters or television shows or, books you read, stuff that energetically lifts you up and that you can model, that's the kind of stuff you can expose yourself to more very leisurely. Like, you watch a movie at night, or you go on YouTube and watch a clip of something or whatever, very leisurely expose yourself to that. In the same way that we very leisurely expose ourselves to negativity, we can leisurely, intentionally expose ourselves to more of these qualities that we want to see in our lives, and we will accept those suggestions readily as well. especially if we want to readily accept them. And as I said yesterday, a lot of this ties in, I think, to like the stuff that Maxwell Maltz talks about in psychocybernetics. And again, I know there's people on YouTube that talk about this stuff, but not enough. Kate Finley over at Generate Magic, she's definitely somebody who's made the connection between psychocybernetics and Neville stuff. I'll put a link above to one of the videos she did somewhat recently about that. But generally speaking, not enough people in the law of assumption community have any idea, first of all, what psychocybernetics even is, and they certainly have not looked at it intelligently. And if you do look at psychocybernetics intelligently, as I know a lot of you watching this channel are very capable of doing, because you wouldn't have made it this far in this video if you're not, into these ideas, genuinely interested in them, and don't just have like a superficial interest in them. If you have a real interest in law of assumption ideas, there's a very good chance that some of the things that Maxwell Maltz talks about in psychocybernetics, about using your imagination, are going to deeply resonate with you. And in my opinion, there's a good chance it's going to make the law of assumption, the ideas that Neville talks about, much easier to apply in your life if you incorporate the psychocybernetics ideas into some of the Neville ideas, if you combine the two. Now, it's fair to claim that in psychocybernetics, Maltz gives a lot of exercises and they can seem overwhelming. I personally think that that's certainly criticism you can make of that book, is that Maltz recommends you do too many things. And so I can tell you right now, this is not a surprise if you're familiar with this channel, you don't have to do all that shit. Maltz has individual exercises and just, he gives so many different exercises and examples. And I've explored a lot of them on the podcast. I'll link below to every podcast episode so you can find the Maxwell Maltz psychocybernetics episodes. He gives so many different exercises, and he says do this for half an hour every day, do this at night every day, every single day. It's like, that's a lot for a lot of us. It's just too much. What I'm saying, especially if you're already familiar with the law of assumption, which everybody on this channel is, just look at psychocybernetics, look at some of those exercises that Maltz talks about, and incorporate one of them or two of them, the ones you like. Don't worry about following all of his directions. You don't have to do that. You do not have to do that. And Matt Furie, who is the head of the Psychocybernetics Foundation, he really makes this clear too. The current version of Psychocybernetics, he edited it, and I recommend checking out Matt Furie's stuff. He's a good guy, and one thing actually that he sends out emails all the time. He emailed us the other day, and he talks about this often, again, it's what we were touching about on yesterday, is that you can use, Maltz calls it shadow boxing, like performing an exercise or like imagining success in a very pressureless way, without the pressure. Like when you're shadow boxing, for instance, an activity like that is like you're boxing an opponent in your mind and you're moving your body kinesthetically. There's zero pressure there. It's very different than being in the ring and actually boxing somebody. But what Maltz is saying, what Matt Furie is saying, is if you practice shadow boxing and get into the kinesthetic, mental, imaginative act of doing that, when you actually step into the ring to box somebody, you'll be a better boxer because of it. In all of these imaginative exercises we do, and all of these things that are being suggested to us throughout the day, if we start to look at it with less pressure and shadow box, instead of thinking like, I'm doing sats right now, I have to do sats right. Instead of doing kind of like a pressurized version of sats, we can sit on our ass. Not exactly the acronym for sats, but it should be. We can sit on our ass, we can lie down, we can do an imaginative exercise, or go to our quiet room. I'll put a link above to a video I did on that, which is a Maltz concept, and just kind of play with these ideas. Play with the idea of being more like that person whose qualities you liked in a movie. Play with those ideas. Again, that's what's great about, like, you watch a movie. There's no pressure when you watch a movie. You see a character that you like, and you're in almost like a hypnotic spell if you're into the movie. You're in a state where you're very, it's very easy to suggest something to you. So you see, you're watching this good movie with a character you like, and what they're doing, you're kind of in that trance-like hypnotic state. What they're doing, if it resonates with you, it really resonates with you on like an emotional, you could say energetic level. You're taking that suggestion to heart, right? You can do that through some of the imaginative exercises too that Maltz talks about in Psycho-Cybernetics. See, we're too in the box, as I was speaking about last week and often speak about, when it comes to these imaginative ideas. We're like, oh, I'm going to do SATs a certain way. Or even some of these Maltz Psycho-Cybernetics exercises, like, oh, I have to do this as the imaginative exercise. No, be flexible. Just take one thing that resonates with you and work on that. The imagination can be worked with very gently, with zero pressure. So it's like, let's give it a stupid example, right? Let's say that, like, if you're doing traditional Neville Sats and, like, you want to be a better golfer. So, like, you imagine hitting the golf ball perfectly, off the tee. Boom. And if you're doing Neville Sats, baby, you're looping that so it feels right again and again. But let's just say that's not working for you. You can do more of a Maltz type thing where it's very loose and you just kind of like picture yourself, but loosely. It's not like, oh, I'm there on the green. Maybe you see yourself first on just a movie screen on the green, just relaxing by the hole. And then maybe you can feel yourself into it, actually doing it, and feel yourself actually hitting the golf ball, right? But it's much more relaxed, loose, whatever. That looseness, that whateverness gives your imagination much more room to play around with. And there's not the pressure of, I'm viscerally looping this scene of hitting the golf ball and it's got to connect over and over again. The stuff that Maltz talks about in Psycho-Cybernetics is much more loose ways of playing with your imagination. And in my opinion, they can be much more effective. I would say that Psycho-Cybernetics is a much more pragmatic, and you could say probably more effective book in terms of giving you suggestions for how to improve your life than anything that Neville wrote for most people. Obviously, there's going to be theatrical people who take to Neville's advice incredibly well. I'm not disputing that whatsoever. But I would say for the majority of people interested in self-improvement, interested in the law of attraction, the stuff in Psycho-Cybernetics, some of those exercises and the approach that Maltz is advocating is going to work better for you than the approach that Neville advocates. I've made podcast episodes and videos on this before, but I thought that once again it was worth mentioning because the tools in Psycho-Cybernetics and the way that Maltz advocates you using your imagination is incredibly beneficial, particularly if you know about the law of assumption. And too many people just don't know about Psycho-Cybernetics. That's it. Questions, coaching, radicalcounselor.com.